Hello and welcome to part 3 of Evidence of Ancient Stone Carving Technology. And this time we're going to go to Baalbek in Jordan and see some actual evidence of ancient stone carving and slicing technology. But first, a small announcement here. Just to be clear, when I say lasers, I am not suggesting they used conventional light lasers like we have today. It would be far too messy and would leave traces of melted stone all over. I am specifically referring to focus-directed energy particle beams. I have also stated that the particle beam technology we humans have today is a pretty primitive state compared to the refined technology of the past, and furthermore, they may have used a much more advanced form of focused direct energy particle beams or similar rock dissolving energy. So when I say lasers, I'm not talking about light lasers. I'm talking about particle beams, disruptor beams, anything that will rearrange the molecular structure or break it down of rock to turn it to powder and remove it very easily without even contacting the stone. And if you want to know exactly what I'm talking about, you sort of have to look at the first part where I kind of laid it out roughly. I don't really know, I wasn't there, but the evidence is in the rock, and there's no way that this stuff can be done with hammers and chisels or anything like that. I'm sure that saws and hammers and chisels were just too primitive. And not only that, but the ancient civilizations that used this technology had to have been here for a while, because some of their technology is a little bit more primitive than the later constructions. So there was a considerable time period there where they did occupy Earth. So moving right on into Baalbek, we see evidence of Roman construction there a lot. There's a lot of Roman, there's some Christian, Muslim. Apparently quite a few civilizations have called this home and did a lot of building here. And the thing that you'll see that you instantly know that it's Roman is these little rows of these like little egg things in the pockets here. Here's one missing, and really is beyond me how they carved this really out of this stone. I just can't see how you can do this with chisels and not make any mistakes. So I do wonder sometimes if they didn't have a little help, or maybe some of that ancient technology was left over and somebody still had it, because the Romans ordered this stuff. They didn't make it themselves. They ordered it, and it was made somewhere else and imported, and then they hauled it there and erected everything. And the Romans built a lot of stuff, and they were probably the greatest builders, I think, on Earth in modern times, calling modern times. This was built, well, it was AD actually. And a lot of these photos don't really show evidence of ancient stone carving technology, but they're just interesting because there are a lot of questions that pop up about Baalbek as far as its very, very earliest origins. And these columns here were imported by the Romans. They're one piece, very smooth, very shiny, amazing pieces of work. And here's a view looking down on the plaza there between the Temple of Jupiter on the right and the Temple of Bacchus on the left. And right through here with my little pointer we can see a row of the original stones, massive, huge blocks that go all the way down here, and then they get to the end up here and it turns right and it goes all the way around this Temple of Jupiter. You can't see the ones on this side of it because it's been totally reconstructed, and I do really wonder what is inside of the base of the Temple of Jupiter, because that's an awful lot of space to be just totally filled in with stones. I can't believe that there wasn't some kind of passageways or something inside of there. But nobody's seen them yet. And here's the Temple of Bacchus, built by the Romans supposedly about 200 AD. And this is an example of why the Romans were probably the best builders on earth as of late. And I do have some questions about the base. I know that it's been reconditioned a little bit here, but these blocks down on the bottom, as we'll see some photos, they are very, very tight fitting, almost too tight fitting. And these are all one-piece columns, and you'll see the little egg-shaped things up here. So obviously they did build it, but like I say, where did they get the parts? Another shot here. We're up on the Temple of Jupiter's base, and here's a view of the stairs here, and these are all massive, huge blocks cut out to the shape of stairs. And I see a lot of massive blocks around here that look like they could have been parts that they cut out of the original large stones that seem to be missing. Here are the stones on the back row here, and then when it gets down here, this last stone kind of goes to the left a little bit, so it almost indicates that originally this went down. This was much larger, and I think there was even a second row of stones on top of these, also large stones, which I think were cut up and used. And the back turns to the left, indicating that it probably went over here and maybe all the way around, but it looks like also it could have taken a right-hand turn and went this way. And underneath these large stones, there's 4 more layers of stones underneath that. And this is the Roman building here on the right, the base of the temple. And it's hard to believe that all that space in there, that there's nothing in there but solid rock. I would think somebody would have thought to put some secret rooms or something in there, or tunnels or passages or something. Another shot of that. We have debris laying all around down here. The level here is lower than the level on this side. And these are massive stones. The sides of these are very smooth too, and I think I have a picture of that. And there was a little offset here, so there has been earthquakes, and obviously moved this stone all the way over to there, shifted them. These in the plaza kind of area, all of these megaliths have these V cuts up here, and then this seam. And then what we're going to look at is of particular interest is the seams. This is where the ancient technology evidence is in Baalbek. Another close-up. Well, this is not a close-up, but another view. They have these V shapes in here, but not all of them. Only the ones on this side have this V thing, and then a highly machined joint angles, bevels, and absolutely perfect joinery. This stone on the inside of Baalbek has several things going on. It looks like what they were trying to do with these big square ones here, and these have been hammered down quite a lot on the top. I think they were taller, and what they're trying to do is make them the same as the ones that have the big beveled edges on them here. So it almost looks like they came up and they used some kind of primitive saws here to try to cut this out, and then they just busted off the pieces. I don't know, this doesn't look Roman to me. I don't think they're this sloppy. But they cut it a slice to the back of the rock and then just busted it off, and I guess they figured they would just hammer this down. But look at how smooth some of these surfaces are here. Uneroded. And over here we have tool marks on the right. I'm not sure, that could be chiseling. It's hard to say. I'd have to really get in there and get a close look. But here is a totally unweathered joint right here. And we'll get some really good shots there of that ancient technology there. And just more shots here of that same stone, but over on this end you can see the round, like they had a saw. This is not what I would call ancient stone carving technology here, but just to show you that that's what they did. They tried to bust them up, and they're trying to make them look like these. And these are like the ones around on the other side. If you go to the left and then around the corner, they're all beveled like this. Perfect bevels, absolutely flawless seams, totally straight. All machined surfaces in here. And back to the Temple of Bacchus, just to get a shot of it here. All these blocks are fitting absolutely perfectly after all thousands of years too. It's the ones on the bottom that are of special interest. And up at the top you'll see the little eggs in their pockets there. These are seams on the base of the Temple of Bacchus, and they are almost a little too perfect. And as you can see here, this is, I mean, that is just a really super fine line. Did the Romans, can they do that to make things fit that perfectly? Straight down, absolutely perfect, 90 degrees, totally flat. And here's a shot of the extreme tight-fitting joints. And here's the west wall showing extreme erosion. And I think that this would help to place the dates on these original stones here well beyond 12,000 years. Just from the erosion alone on some of these stones. Here in the northwest corner, we have what looks to me like a missing stone. That's why I think there's a second row over here on this wall, which would be the north wall, which is the most eroded and oldest looking. All of those stones, I think they were all cut up. And that there wasn't originally, there was a stone here, because why would you build this whole thing and then leave a stone missing on here? And it's the same thing on the other end. That stone is also missing, which would indicate another second row going down on top of the ones in the middle. So this was a truly huge structure. How do we know there weren't three, rows originally when this thing was built, like 50,000 years ago? I think that's totally believable. And here's the north wall with progressively smaller stones as you go down. Absolutely perfect joints, and there are unweathered beveled edges. Like here, for instance, these bevels, as I have pointed out before, look just like they were made yesterday, totally uneroded. There had to have been something done to that surface where the bevel was done that somehow changed the rock and made it resistant to weathering. Because the rest of the stone is well weathered down. Here's a little better shot showing that we have a double bevel down here, and these bevels are not always the same angle or the same size. It really just depends on how offset the rock was and how they want to make it look even. So if the rock went out farther, they seemed like they made changed the angle on the bevel here to make it look more natural and flatter. But we have a bevel on the bottom too. Now this one is kind of eroded, but you see little pieces of it down here on the right corner that are not. And obviously this could have been hammered somehow, but it's on the upside, so you would expect a little bit more weathering there, but it's still visible. So this edge here is unweathered and practically impervious to weathering, which means that something had to have been done to the surface of that stone during this process of the beveling. And this is interesting because there is no bevel on the stone below, but there is on the stone above. And notice the extreme erosion on these rocks. You've seen this whole north wall is just totally trashed. But then we have these pristine bevel marks. Obviously not done with chisels, hammers, or pounders, or light lasers. And again on the north wall, just a view of how big the stones are. This is on the inside of that wall, south side of the north wall, and we have these layers of stones, one after another, and I think there's 4 layers from here down, 4 layers. And I think a lot of this stuff was quarried. So we're probably only seeing 1/10 of what we should be seeing. Here we can see where they really had the double bevel going up here, bevel here, but not really much on the bottom stones for some reason. Only the huge, largest stones. But then there are signs of beveling here and there, but it's so badly eroded here, it's hard to tell. Totally perfectly straight, tight-fitting seams on multi-hundred-ton stones. Another picture here, and look how massive they are. These are tall, and these sides are really smooth. I doubt if anybody went in there and smoothed them off, which means this other side looked like this side at one time. So you can see how much the difference of the weathering is. And I think also there was a row of stones on top of these a long time ago. And then here's the side of the stone. You can see how totally smooth it is. And we know this stone's been here for tens of thousands of years, I think. This is a nice picture because it shows you how flat and smooth it is in here. And notice the resistant to weathering edge here. And some parts here are actually still in good shape. And the stones on the bottom are not exactly small either. More stones. Here's a place where somebody dug it out a little bit. You can see there's at least 1, 2, 3 layers. This is where it goes down on the end, and it's possible that this went to the left at one time, but it really more likely goes straight forward. But for sure I think it turned to the right, but it's buried under like where those steps would be going up to the Temple of Jupiter. Just a photo here exemplifying the extreme age but yet perfect joinery. Another shot of the missing stone corner there. Now here we have what looks like, you can see right here, this is square, this is no chisel, it's equally spaced. These channels are flat, and you can see where they used it over here, but then they used this rake tool to go over that. But these are perfectly, in this example, it's pretty obvious we have something going on here. These are flat on the top, those are flat on the bottom, equally spaced. And it looks like they used this tool first to come down this way. And this is not a chisel, this was some type of energy device that dissolved the rock. But look at this pattern here, almost as if the rock was soft. And then you can barely see over here, but they went over it with this. You can see where this one here sliced through this one, because we have the lines going through it up here. And we have the same pattern over here. Now, believe it or not, this is on one of the seams between the giant megalithic blocks. And no one would have a chisel as small as this here on the right. There's no way you could have a chisel that small and do everything in perfect little rows. You can see where they just ran it right across the rock here to smooth it off, almost as if it was done by a machine, but it had to be a machine that was almost like a drone. It knew what it was doing, whatever. Or it was people, but there are some seams here that just, I don't even think people could do. This one, notice that this is all eroded here. It's all cut out in the big V shape, but how eroded it looks, but only where the seam is. It looks newer. And this is totally uneroded through here. Just like new. Which should surprise you, because all of this water and sand and rocks and pebbles, they're channeled into here. And it comes down here. This thing should be completely ground out and washed away. But it isn't. It looks brand new. I would say that was definitely a sign of ancient stone carving technology. Here's another seam, or a joint. Same deal. Totally uneroded, where most of the water would be channeled to and running through. This side here looks brand new. And then over here we see the usual tiny, tiny, tiny little chisel marks, or whatever they are. Well, I mean, they're not chisel marks, but I guess we could say particle beam tool marks. And what's interesting here is we have the original shape, but look how higher this one is, how much higher that is compared to this one. So did this come out way out here and then come down? Why would it do that? But another strange thing is that this joint, it's not dressed up like the others. It's a straight, fit. Another view here showing where they're trying to whittle this rock down to make it look like this one. But who did that? Looks primitive here, so it wasn't the builders for sure. But notice that all of these are square. They don't have this bevel on them. They just come straight up. So they're actually way bigger than these. And these are all square from now on. But they have the finished seams on them all through here. And also these stones on the south side of the Temple of Jupiter just don't look as old as the ones on the north side, which would indicate that the civilization that built these, or settlement, or whatever you want to call it, also built the ones on the other side, but over a period of time, a long period of time. Maybe this is a structure that has been here for 50,000 years, and they just kept adding on it and remodeling and so on. And I think that the base for the Temple of Bacchus just could be part of that original complex. But I don't have any proof. But no one really knows what was there before that temple was erected, right? So we don't have any pictures, and there doesn't seem to be any written evidence. And here's looking straight down on the wedge cutouts at the top. And right here we have the machined edges here. You can probably zoom in a little bit, but I don't want to make it too fuzzy. But we see the telltale mini lines here. The extreme erosion on the rock out here that wasn't finished like it was in here. And look how many angles we have. One angle, another angle, a side I should say, another side. So this is a three-sided bevel. And look how sharp it is down there. No way you're going to do that with a chisel. And this almost indicates to get that angle in there, you'd almost have to do that before you even put the stones together, because that's a pretty sharp angle, unless of course you've got the particle beam that'll do an angle, but I think that would be pretty hard. This one doesn't have the same angles on it, but it might be that it's just a little more worn down. But then again, all this water, and sand and everything's going through here, why does that look brand new? That should be the most eroded part of the whole stone. More excellent evidence of ancient stone carving technology. And let me zoom that in a little bit. Notice the sharp edge along here too. It just goes almost straight up. Over here on this side too, extremely eroded. That looks like feldspar. And we have only one sharp bevel here. This one's not quite as sharp, but that looks new. And then we have the same fine grained, fine, I'm still not sure what to call these. It can't be a chisel, because this is only a few inches, and chisels aren't that small, and it would be some kind of a rake chisel, but I think it would be useless against something like this. Now, did they do that just to roughen it up on purpose? But whatever they did, it's lasted tens of thousands of years with practically zero weathering here. And if that isn't a direct evidence, then I don't know what is. Let's go to the next one. So this is the base of the Temple of Bacchus, and I'm really wondering about these stones. Look at this is all one stone, and it's scrolled like that on the bottom, and then this up here too, it's all part of the stone. And look how huge they are. Now, the early megalithic builders didn't really seem to be too interested in putting designs like this. Could this be the last stages of their civilization, and this was actually a base to something else, and then the Romans came along and built something on top of it? Because I'm having a hard time believing that these stones right here were set in here by the Romans, whether they ordered them somewhere or not. The fit is just too tight, too good, and these are all one stone, all scroll. Now, I know the Romans were the best builders, so it's very possible that they somehow managed to do this. But where did they get these stones? These could have been, well, I don't even think they could have cut them from here, because I don't think they can do this down here on the bottom. I know they're good stone carvers. We've seen what they can do. So if this is all Roman, then I just respect them even more. So this shows a close-up a little better of these stones. I think I mistakenly said this was all one stone. I didn't mean that. These are all separate stones, and these are the ones I showed you where they fit absolutely. But look at that line. That line is so straight. I just didn't know that the Romans could cut stone that good. It almost looks too, it even looks like these stones were cut out of the quarry right next to each other, because of the pattern in the stone here. But maybe I'm just seeing things. It could be just staining. I don't know. It's hard to tell about that. Look at that line. And this is after thousands of years, okay? I don't think anybody knows who built this, but I would say some of that was probably from the very earliest people that occupied this place or built it. Because these stones down here they just look too old. And look at the base. It's on that same exact kind of stone that the giant stones are made out of. You can see it's very, very huge crystals. And if you think about it, the Romans made this stuff, but it looks better than anything that's really ancient, like from 10, 20, 30,000 years ago. Now, it's true, a lot of that stuff got eroded and it's just not around anymore, but still, this has lasted for thousands. It's going to last more thousands probably. So this is pretty fantastic. Even compared to the ancient builders that built even the pyramids and so on, this construction is just beautiful. And it has, survived the test of time. So I guess what I'm saying is that the Roman builders were as good as any ancient builders. They just didn't, and considering too that they didn't even have the technology that the ancients had. And look what they did. So here's a shot of the north wall again. And of course I'm told, or we are told, that this is all damaged from fires and this and that, but yet none of the other walls seem to look like this. But look at this. I mean, this is just plain erosion. And look, it even has the V shapes up here in the top, but the joints are just so horribly worn. Let me see if I can zoom this just a little bit and get it over in the picture somehow. This joint on the left, just look how horrible that looks. Comes down through here and then down this way. It's just totally eroded. And this surface is supposed to be one of the treated surfaces too, where the joint is. And so we have the three huge stones here going through here, and then we have the building on top, the missing one on the left, and I still think that there were stones on top, that this wall used to be even taller. And here are those beveled stones on the front that really look like, because of the stones on the top, you see, and then it comes out, it's beveled down and then it goes straight down. Well, that's all nice. So wouldn't then this show that this row of stones right here, the three sisters or whatever they are, actually should continue all the way around the corner, and there should be another row of stones right on the top here all the way around the corner, and we have one missing over here. Maybe that is just the top stone, but why would you have these beveled, shouldered stones like this on the other side with no stones on the top, and the ones that are after, following these lower ones on the other side, are followed by square stones that don't have bevels on them. And so those huge square stones, and they look like they've been whittled down quite a lot, probably also had a row of stones on the top of that. So this ancient structure was originally much, 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 much bigger, and it has been quarried through thousands and thousands of years. So because of the amount of quarrying and the age and the weathering of all these rocks, these stones to me look like they got originally started at least 20,000 years, probably more. And when we looked at the glacier charts, the glacier then, the peak was 35,000 years ago to 25,000, something like that. So that means that a good time to live on the planet that wasn't iced over is before 35,000. So that could logically put these at probably around 50,000 or more, because actually we can go back 140,000 years and still be in a pretty livable conditions. And this is the end of the north wall on the west corner, and there was obviously had to be stones on the top of this, and they're gone. But look at the age. And this is on the inside, where we can see the square blocks over here started, and there was some work done later, and I see these marks here, which I still think could be directed energy particle beam stone carving tools or devices. And then it looks like somebody came along and they just started grinding this out, but this was not done with any high technology. You can see how rough that is. That's what chisels and hammers do. I mean, even the walls that were built after this, look how high they were, way up there, and there's stones missing there. So this place was, I think, probably been about 90% quarried. Here's a nice old picture. It shows your row of the megalithic stones here. And notice how big these are right in the middle here. They seem bigger than these stones down here, but it might just because of the debris on the ground. But, you know, they were beveled up to this point. Then they started trying to grind these down to make them look like that for some reason. But I think there was another row on top of this row that went all the way here. And this stone over here on the right-hand side by the stairs is one of these, only it points this way. And there's another one back here. It looks like maybe a couple, I'm not sure. And so this stone, I think that these could have very well gone ahead and gone right to the north, which is straight into the picture, and connected to the other side over here. So it was a big square, but how high was this thing? And was it, you know, did it have, what did it have in the middle here? What did they remove? Or what was here when they went to build this, the Temple of Jupiter? And down at the quarry, there's plenty of evidence. Look at these stones. They've already been cut out. And all they're doing, it looked like they were just clearing out the stone from underneath there. This looks like it just got filled in with debris over the years, but look at it, it's cut perfectly straight. And here's another one. Now how did they get pounders down in there? You can't do that with pounders. And look at these seams, look at that edge. No hammers and chisels were used here. I don't think ever. Just a quick aerial view here. Our megalithic stones are down here, the Temple of Jupiter over here, but these stones come this way and all the way around this whole thing. And I think they connect here underneath all of this. They probably just built right over it. And who knows what's in the middle of this thing, underneath all of those stones? That is completely filled with stones. I don't even think there's any dirt in there. And here's what's left of that temple. And this is part of that temple. Another nice aerial view, and here's the Temple of Venus over here, where we're not allowed to go, apparently. But here's the north wall, and it's curious that they didn't just build right up to the north wall and over the wall for this, you know, big structure here. So there's another anomaly. And just another picture of one of the greatest Roman buildings ever made. And a well-preserved shot of these V-shaped things that I'm not even sure what their purpose was, but obviously a lot of water came down through here, and these seams are brand new. And then we have these drag marks over here. There's a lot of those around here. I'm not actually sure what this is because it looks like this wasn't just eroded down that way. Somebody made it that way. Just another shot showing a view of the stones and the Temple of Jupiter. Now down at the quarry, we find that underneath these giant megalithic stones are these seams that go right underneath. And they were clawing out with the tool or the device this rock down here. And work seems to have stopped workday, because for some reason they just didn't continue. But there's already a quote unquote laser cut through here. It was a beam cut, and apparently they can focus these beams to be very small, and they seem to have an indefinite distance on them because they go all the way through. So what they did was they cut these things and then tried to expose the stone as much as possible so that they can move it. But it's already been cut, so when they get all this debris out of here, it's already flat and straight on the bottom. You can't do that with pounders. Oh, I forgot where this could be, the Temple of Venus or the top of the Temple of Bacchus. Just another shot of stones, more stones. Another aerial view. And this shows how many layers down. We've got four layers. More of the strange rake marks. These are interesting too if you really look at them too, because if you look at the bottom of where the rake went, right down here, this is what I'm talking about, particle beams. You don't do this with a chisel. You can't have straight, perfectly flat lines on the bottoms of these grooves. And this is why I think they used a combination of particle beam and sonic energy to shake this stuff apart as they dragged their particle beams through here, the particle beam tool device. The bottoms of these, notice even it's a different color. And it's a different color, but it's much more resistant. It's more smooth. So you wouldn't get this just from chiseling along, because you wouldn't be able to make a straight line like that, not consistently straight and fairly equally distanced. I think I showed in a previous video that they could have a device that has anywhere from 2 to multiple, many more beams coming out. Depends on how wide they want to make it. So that's, to me, as far as I'm concerned, this is evidence right here. Just these little white grooves you see. That's where the beam itself went through and actually changed the surface of that rock right where the beam hit. And this tool works in such a way that you only need to drag, say your beam is 3 wide, as you drag it across, these two right in here, these two high areas would be blasted out as you're dragging your tool along. And it just crumbles. And then we have primitive technology that came later, where they were trying to saw straight down and then just bust it off. You can see how sloppy that was. So here we are back at the joinery again. And if you'll look real close, you'll see that this is pristine through here. And even this is pristine. This is all pristine right here. This is not eroded. Time has taken its toll, but these angles here are very sharp, totally smooth, not weathered. And this isn't even really weathered, just because you see the cracks, but the basic surface here with the, and this has 2 angles on it, one here, another end here, 2 surfaces I mean, and then it goes off to the edge because they want to make it look nice. This one goes farther than that one. So if you're not a believer in this evidence of ancient stone carving technology, then this should make you a believer. This is one of the beveled edges on the 1,000+ ton blocks, and you can see this little line right down the middle here, and then this is perfectly smooth with 10,000 or more years wear, probably 20,000, who knows. But this is absolutely perfectly, and you'd think perfectly straight. And you'd think, oh, well, those look like saw marks. No, and they do look kind of curved-ish a little bit, but that doesn't mean, I mean, the tool that they used happened to just make striations maybe, but I think a little bit of that is weathering. And if it was a saw, there'd be a termination point over here. So it couldn't be sawed. And this couldn't be sawed because it goes into a tight-fitting V. And it would be awful hard to run a saw down, around this corner that's above, because it comes down, it goes at an angle, and then straight down. So we can see that this is an extremely smooth edge. I don't see any chisel marks on there anywhere. I don't think any pounders did that. But this little line right on the corner is very indicative of a definitely a machine mark, but I think it's almost like a ley line where you have this beam cuts the corner and then it goes out this way and then that way. So that is probably the best piece of evidence at Baalbek that these blocks were not just cut with saws. More stunning evidence of joints that are tens of thousands of years old, and they look like they were made yesterday. I doubt if somebody came in later and did this, because look what kind of technology they'd have to make these things. That is unbelievable. Totally unweathered, uneroded, original surfaces. Water's been running down there. I know it doesn't rain there a lot, but it did in the past. And nothing. It's just perfect. Zooming out a little bit, we see that the edge is absolutely perfectly straight. And this is one of those beveled edges. And the extreme age is evident by the cracks. But look at that part right there. I'll see if I can zoom in on that a little bit. But that is totally smooth. You can barely see a little bit of wear over here. So this has been somehow weatherized. And it's the process that this particle beam, or whatever technology they had adapted, but it's similar, I'm sure. It shows that stone can be shaped very easily if you have the right tools. And over here on the right, we see this wasn't a saw, because then there'd be some sign of the saw. And this is rough over here. It comes up, actually. So there'd be like an edge on that. But if you look over here, there's no saw marks, but you can see these streaks. These could be just striations, normal striations in the stone. But no saw marks here, but yet the surface is pristine. So we know it wasn't cut with a saw. It just looks too good and too new. If it was saws, you'd see that. Another perfect joint with just a hint of the bevel in here. Very small bevels. They didn't do the same that they did to the other side, but they dressed these joints down on the that I just showed you, where they have the V's up in the top, those little big V cutouts. And here on the extremely eroded west wall, we still have absolute tight fitting. You can see what a perfectly straight line here, and look at the erosion, which places this pretty old. Another picture of a joint that is so perfect that the rock is probably fused together. And this is on the original, the big megalithic stones, the 2,000-ton ones. How you certainly can't move a stone around and reposition it and sand each side. This had to be cut like this right out of the quarry or wherever they cut these things out of. And just a close-up of the dressing tool that they used. That wasn't chisels, it's too small. You'd be there to take you, forever to chisel anything with little tiny chisels like that. It just wouldn't work. Another stunning example of a joint that is who knows how old, but we have the same style here. But look at that. If that wasn't made yesterday, I don't know. Absolutely, totally perfect, smooth, uneroded, unweathered. I mean, that's a pretty nice technology when you can not only cut the stone and shape it, but it does something to the surface that enhances its resistibility to weathering. That is advanced technology used for peaceful purposes. And when we get in a little closer, we see that this is a specific style on the left, and we have a kind of a bevel on this stone, and this stone looks a lot different than the stone on the right. So I would say we're looking at two different kinds of stone here. Obviously this one withstood the test of time a little better, but doesn't that look absolutely perfectly smooth and flat? Can't even dream of doing that with hand tools or chisels or anything. I don't care what kind of chisels you've got. So here's the stone that's on the east end of the north wall, and look at the way this is one stone, and it looked like it went this way. Now it's been all hammered off, but what kind of time would do this to a stone? Look at that thing. It is really beat up. And this isn't just, look at down here. That's got to be tens of thousands of years of weathering. I'm not only trying to show that there was this ancient technology, but when it existed. And here's a perfect example of what I've been saying about how they cut these stones out first. And you can see the line right through here. That is some kind of a focused particle beam cut through the rock. They just slice through that thing, and then using the scooping tools or whatever you have, whatever works best, you start scooping the material out of underneath this thing, because you think, well, how are we going to move this stone now that we've cut it out? Well, you have to scoop it out, and then I imagine when they get to a certain point, they probably maybe have to put some supports on it. Okay? Now this is where it really gets wild. How do you move the stone? Well, as I have previously mentioned, the only way they can move that stone that big, and they didn't just drag these things around, is they had to have been lifted. And, I know you're not going to believe this, but it's the only logical conclusion that I can come to, is that they somehow used some kind of energy, directed particle beam or what, to levitate the stones. But I think somehow they can't just levitate the stone out of the ground, because it has to be separated from the ground. It has to be kind of like by itself in order to surround it by this field, probably some kind of an electromagnetic field that surrounds the whole stone, and therefore it becomes anti-gravity. But you can't just do it if it's laying on the ground, because you've got to get the field all the way around this thing. So you grind out the bottom here. It's already been cut. Just need to remove everything below it or around it, so that you can put it on maybe some stands or something, and then you can enclose this whole thing in some kind of an energy field, and then you can lift it up, probably done with some kind of a drone or spaceship maybe, and they just lifted the things up, they bring them up where they go, and they drop them down. Of course they did this 30, 40, 50, 100,000 years ago, so there's nothing to be written evidence of this, so you just have to assume. What other way? There is no other way. And if they had the technology to slice rocks like this, do you think lifting it's going to be any problem? I don't think so. No one's going to do the kind of work it takes to move these things around. But it looks like the work at the quarry came to an abrupt stop. So maybe it was time to leave Earth. Probably, big catastrophe. They just got tired of one after another, the ice ages and so on. And they might have just packed up and left. Maybe it was the plasma storm that got them. And then here's these other stones all ready to go here. How did they cut those out of the ground if they're laying in the ground? So this whole area is just got to be excavated out. Another close-up example of the ancient stone carving technology here. As I said, the stone has already been cut. It's already been cut out. They're not carving that stone by carving this stuff out down here. And look at these stroke marks. This was a double, or it looks like a double or maybe triple beamed particle beam, or disruptor or whatever, to break apart the rock. And they just simply got to just remove it down below. And they're not chiseling this out. This is done with some kind of device. Extreme close up here of the V cuts on the top, and then right here you have the two bevels here. This one's kind of eroded, but we have these little tiny lines here. So apparently, like I said before, these handheld devices, or drone held devices, or cyborg held devices, had very small beams on them, rows of beams. So it acted like a rake chisel, kind of, where you just drag it over, but it's a very fine thing, because they're doing fine work here. And look at the angles right here. Look how sharp those are. Absolutely perfectly sharp, flat angles. And a saw didn't do that. More evidence on the megalithic stones. I guess probably the north wall and the south wall have these, the big V shapes, but you don't see this on the west wall too much. But here we go, the same small striations here, the perfect V cuts. Look at the angle there. Just perfect, flat, uneroded. So the rock has somehow been physically vitrified, but it's not glass. Because if you vitrify something, it actually has no crystal structure anymore, and it becomes more like glass, or like obsidian, or flint. Perfect seam, absolutely perfect. Look how tight. More fantastic Roman construction at Baalbek. I'd love to get a hold of the guy that chisels this stuff out and just meet this person. To do so many columns, I mean miles and miles of this stuff on all the buildings they made. And here's another view, by the way, of the northwest corner. We have the shouldered rocks over here, but then look at all these layers down below. 1, 2, 3, probably 4 down here. So we've got all these stones here too. So they didn't just put these big ones in. They did a lot of work. All of these stones are absolutely perfectly fitting. And here's the stairway. I swear, I think some of these stairs were made from some of those missing giant megalithic stones from earlier. And right within, see this little wall right here? I think and this almost makes it look like this whole place has been filled in with stones, totally solid stones. I think there's something inside of here. And the original wall, I think, probably passed right through, just on the other side of there, or maybe through here, And look at the size of these stones over here. So these could be very well be quarried right from the existing Baalbek, which was Heliopolis when the Romans were there. And back at the quarry, we have a stone over here ready to be separated from the stone below it, but it's already been cut. And look at these little houses down here. Would you just go in with a chisel and start chiseling away and chisel out your house if all you had was a chisel and you're just a worker there? No, these had to have been made with rock scooping tools. And they were said, hey, why don't you borrow the tools and go, you guys go down there and make yourself some little houses and stuff. And that's exactly what they did. This wasn't all done with chisels and hammers. That would be too hard, but you have the tools, you just go and grind out the rock as fast as you can wave that tool across it. Then you can make stuff like this. Can't do that with hammers and chisels. I mean, maybe you could, but it'd take you a million years. And also this sort of indicates that there had to have been people or creatures of some kind living here. Because drones and robots wouldn't need places to live. And here's another view of these cuts in the corners. They're very curious. But then remember, there were stones piled on top. So maybe these continued up through the next stones. And see how pretty that would look if these were higher and they went straight up. But we have the same, uneroded surface here where water and everything's been channeling down here. Sand's been running across that. We really need to get a thin section through these one of these seams. But don't go over there and start grinding away on anything, because you'll go to jail. Even though the place has been 90% quarried and picked clean to the bones over the years. If you go and scratch a stone, you go to jail. I mean, look at the base on this thing. Did the Romans really do the base, and did they really build? I know they assembled it, but I don't know. I just have a feeling that something was there already. Like this whole base down here. But like I say, the fancy scroll work on the edges of the stone doesn't look like the original builders, did that. Maybe they just couldn't do stuff like that. I don't know. If they couldn't, then how come the Romans could? Another joint between the stones in the plaza area there, totally uneroded, unweathered. That could have been done yesterday. Smooth edges in here. And here's the tunnel. I'm not sure what's going on here. These stones on the right and the left, look how they look. I mean, that's a certain style. I don't think that was erosion that did that. I think that's the way it looked to begin with. And is this an original tunnel from the original structure? Which would mean that Baalbek was probably quite a place. It was like a big city, or it had a lot more buildings. I think we're only seeing a tenth of the original stones. So you have to kind of think about that when you're looking at this place. It's really been hammered and reconstructed and so on, but there's enough evidence there to place the occupancy here back tens of thousands of years. And the Romans were excellent stone carvers. And how did they do this? If they had a little tiny, like a handheld, like a stencil kind of a tool or something, like almost like a pencil that had this directed energy beam coming from it, I could see where they could come in and do all this intricate work. Because how do you make like this scroll thing here so perfectly straight? Every one is perfect. And inside, like, you know, behind these eyes and everything. That's such a small place for a chisel. You'd have to just practically have a pin to do it. And then here's the little eggs again. They're all over the place. So Roman. But look at those flowers and everything. I mean, how do you do that with a chisel? I don't know. And there's miles and miles of this stuff. And here's that perfectly preserved. I mean, even 5,000 years. Okay, so I think we get the main idea here. And these are all on the stones, the original stones. Unbelievably tight fitting. We got bevels. We got the same bevels that we see in Peru. Same exact thing. Same, different style on this. Here is a different style. You don't see that in Peru, or maybe anywhere else. Maybe because it's just too old and you know, predates Peru, but I think this probably all happened about the same time. And there's another shot of that. I love these angles down here. Perfect angles. Just came straight down. We've got several sides here. 1, 2, 3. And you know this is totally unweathered because of these little striations all over the place. And they're even over here too. So this stayed resistant and the rest of it didn't. I mean, this is a mess. Look at that rock. And then look at this. This cannot be ignored. Again, incredible. But the thing is that the big giveaway is the non-weathering. No erosion in areas where there should be more erosion. But nothing. So it had to be. There had to be an energy type tool that changes the structure of the surface. Maybe it compacts it. I don't know what it does, but it makes it practically impervious to weather, which is something you'd want if you're building stone structures. And here we are back at the quarry again. Now this is after, of course, tens of thousands of years of erosion, being buried and everything else. But look at how the bottom is here. That's totally flat. We got a straight edge along here almost. Looks like it's been hammered a lot from people probably. But look how they dig it out. I think I already showed you this one. But they dig it out. And all you have to do is dig out, and this stuff just falls away, and you've got the flat bottom there already. The rock is already cut. Another shot of the tunnel. And over here at the quarry again, you see we have over here on the far right a stone. This stone. Here, the big one. There's another one under that. And here's one over here. And there's probably more. How in the world did they get stacked up like that? How could you cut these stones out down here unless I say all of this material has to come out? This was added in. And then we can see what happened here. I doubt that these just ended up down here, because then why would they be scooping out down here if that's, you know, stone? And also it's separated from the stone below it too, because there's a line through there. So definitely signs of or evidence of ancient stone carving technology. If you can, and look how straight and flat. So how would you cut those out? Look at the space between these two. I doubt that they were cut and then just thrown in here. These look like they're right original position, and they're at an angle probably for the purposes of the grain of the, or I mean the direction of the layer, you know, the bedding and so on, and that's why these are at an angle. Here's a quick shot showing how shiny and smooth those lavender columns are. I don't know. That looks pretty smooth. And so much has been quarried here. I wonder why is all this still here? Look at all those stones that somebody missed. All the columns. I mean, where are all the columns? Like in the Jupiter temple. And here's a really old photo, and it looks like some stones have been taken since this photo was taken, because right out here, this whole center part looks all different. Right here. There's a lot of stuff missing, and look how high these walls are. I don't even think those walls are there right now. I'm not sure. And down at the quarry, here's the space between the two stones. We can see that this is obviously filled in here with regular dirt. Looks like it came in layers too. We see some of the particle beam rake tools here. Perfectly flat, smooth side down here. Look how smooth that is. And look how close they are together. You couldn't go in there and chisel out of them. You couldn't even fit in there if you were a person. More practically impossible Roman stone carving. I don't think they had advanced technology. That's what cracks me up, is look what they can do without it. I think this is in Italy somewhere. And this is that Roman building that's downtown. It's by a big fountain. I forgot the name of the city. But there are your Roman eggs. Right there. And up there. All over. So whenever you see that, you know you're looking at Roman stuff. Another view of the Bacchus temple here. I like the base view because the sun is showing on these blocks here, showing the lines, how straight they are. Very nice. Here's a really old picture. And you can see what disarray these blocks are down here. And it almost looks like these are piled up way beyond here. So where did all these blocks come from? And it looks like it's all just totally filled in here. You can see how much work they did here. Look at the way that stuff is piled up back there. Piled up down there. So there was a lot of clearing done here. Okay, well, I miraculously did this in just 1 hour and 15 minutes. So next time I'll be going to India. And maybe beyond there, I want to go see Petra, China. There's more places, and I don't know how many more parts there's going to be, but I'm going to keep going on this until I convince somebody that this particle beam energy stone carving technology is the only logical choice. Hammers, saws, too primitive. And it's important to remember that just because we don't have it doesn't mean it doesn't exist or hasn't existed. We're newcomers. We can prove that, or at least show that civilizations have been here tens of thousands of years ago, and we don't have any records that go beyond that. But that doesn't mean they weren't there. Everything that was there is eroded and gone. I really doubt that even this, with its special surface, rearrangement of the molecules here, would even last forever. So it's obviously lasting longer than the rest of the stone, which is good enough. So it's really just a matter of opening your mind and realizing that we're not as modern as we think. All we have is electricity. And everybody's had electricity. We didn't invent it. It's already there. Take away our electricity and what do you have? Not much of an advanced civilization anymore, is it? So we're quite primitive. And our thinking is primitive. And we have to get past that. And it's hard to go on unless you have something solid to go on. But even if you're not 100% sure, you still have to make an assumption and then go with it. And maybe in the end it'll play out. But this is pretty obvious that we have evidence of ancient stone carving technology right here. So you guys have a good day, and I'll see you in part 4. So have a great day.